What would you do, David, if you could film 157 trillion frames a second?
I would start a new slow-mo guys channel. That's what I would do.
Yeah, what were they up
The
to? Are they still
slowest
around?
mo guys.
The slowest.
I don't know why they wouldn't be around. Unless it was still under Rooster Teeth, and Rooster Teeth recently folded.
Yeah, we never talked about that.
No.
We can get to that, but we should
another video. We
can
should
save
talk
it
about
for
That's
later.
a good topic.
No, there's a new camera. The scientists, I want to get this right. There's a lot of science in this story. Scientists invent the world's fastest camera that shoots 156.3 trillion frames per second.
Wow.
They
How
call
do you
it
expose for
scarf.
something like that?
How do you expose? Yeah.
Can you expose for something like that?
Well,
Or
reading through the
what
article,
are you getting with
it
that?
gets a little lost in the sauce with all the technical jargon. They're using lasers of some sort, but they're also using off the shelf parts. I think using some kind of CCD imaging sensor. So it's lasers, sensors, and they're able to capture some kind of field of view.
Do they know what it's for? Like why it was invented?
Science.
Just for science.
It's always
For
science.
just to push the limits, just to see how far it could get.
Just because they could.
Because I know, well, obviously, like there's the Phantom cameras that a lot of people are familiar with high-end like film productions. But I don't know if you've heard of that camera, the Kronos.
The Kronos. That's a few years old, right? Unless they've gotten a new one.
They have upgraded. They have 4K now.
This is
For the
news to
longest
me.
time- well, yeah, news to me, right? A few days ago, I was actually just randomly, I think on Instagram, I think I follow them, but I hadn't thought about that camera in such a long time. So it's kind of funny you bring up slow-mo cameras because I was like, oh yeah, I just came across Kronos the other day.
What are they up to?
4K.
How many frames?
Which I'm not sure. I know it's at least 1,000 frames. That's what they used to do.
Okay.
For 1080. We could probably look it up.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
But it was just, that's the first thing I saw. I was like, oh, they're up to 4K now. Nice. Which again, they used to just be HD up to 1080. But yeah, the micro four thirds camera. Wait, or is it C mount?
There's a Kronos 4K 12 camera. Is that the one?
That might be the one. Yeah.
Maybe. I'd have to do a little deep dive into this because some of the first stuff that comes up says HD, and that's not the one you're talking about. You're talking about the 4K 12 camera.
Yeah, it's a little bit pricier.
Yeah, just a bit. 17,000.
Yes.
Do you feel
Made to
like
order.
high frame rates are as sought after as they used to be?
That depends what you're doing. There was a period of time where all I wanted was like super high frame rates because I was doing a lot of like product photography, like coffee. I was trying to get like coffee drips. I never got
dropping some beans in a cup.
I never got like that slow mo. But I think like maybe the fastest I was shooting like 240 on like, the GH5 back then, like in the super high frame rate. But I think the resolution was only 1080,
And not even. It's kind of like a
yeah.
1080 wink wink.
Right. Yes. But
Yeah, it's
it looked
1080.
nice on social media. You know, if you're just
Oh,
gonna
yeah,
watch it
yeah.
on like a super small screen.
Do you know that's
fine.
the other thing? That so many people have such bad eyesight, it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, people are afraid to admit it, or what?
Well, for as much as we pixel peep and we're looking at the difference between 4K and 1080 and 720 and 8K, and you can actually see it, half the population, their own eyeballs can't render this much detail and resolution. So they look at it and they go, yeah, it looks the same.
Yeah, that's the rabbit hole you go down, especially with like macro photography or videography, because you can get close, but you can always get closer. So you kind of have to make that determination of like, okay, is this as close as I really want to go? And then you have to figure out, how to get enough in focus. Because once you get to that like microscopic level, so little is in focus where you really have to kind of remember like what the whole intention of that you were filming.
Yeah. I looked up the specs for the Kronos 4K 12. I don't know why that's the name of it. It shoots 1,397 frames per second at 4K. And it looks like it has some kind of internal memory. So you have to buy either the 64 gig version or the 128 gig version. And I can imagine there's definitely some uses for that. Some, extreme action, sports, videography, high speed, whatever you want to capture. But I feel like lately, even once 4K 120 became more common, So the GH6 can do that. We were doing that on the Ursa Mini for a period of time. So much that we film doesn't need to be that slow. No. So we just kind of go back to 4K 60, and it seems to be enough for most purposes.
60 is really slow, and especially when, I don't know.
For human movement.
Right, and modern edits are usually like, I think the quickest can be like less than a second nowadays. So anything slower than 60 frames a second, especially if you're doing a really quick edit, unless you're speed ramping, it's really difficult to see if it even is a video. It might as well be in a photo, So it is interesting because you always think like, oh man, I really want super high frame rate, and then you're like, well, what am I actually going to be doing? Like, how am I going to edit this? Do I need that?
The thing you're filming has to be moving incredibly fast. Mm-hmm. And we've done it, the trick when you shoot 4K 60 and you slow it down, handheld shots are a little bit smoother, a little bit more stable.
Yeah.
You go too slow and all of a sudden it just looks like a photograph if nothing's moving. Mm-hmm. And then you lose all of the video elements because you've essentially frozen the motion, which can be cool if it is something moving really fast.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, when it was 60 frames a second was becoming more popular and people knew that you could slow it down, it became just like slider shots or just like drone shots. It became ubiquitous almost overnight and everyone was doing it, and then it kind of loses the appeal. And so chasing higher and higher frame rates for content creation. I mean, these scientists doing trillions of frames a second, a little different story.
Right.
But for people like you and me, 120, 240.
Yeah, it depends what you're trying to do. Of course, if I want to start a YouTube channel called The Slow-Mo Guys.
The Slowest Guys.
Everything is going to be in slow motion.
We could change the name of this channel to The Slowest Guys. And that might be accurate for this podcast.
We could just talk very slow.
Yeah, people would get a kick out of it in the comments.
Yeah. Like we're working at the DMV. Who's that sloth character? Did you ever see that movie?
Flash.
Flash?
That's his name.
The sloth is called Flash?
Yeah.
Nice. You took it one step further. I didn't even know his name. But apparently.
Yeah, Zootopia. It's a great kids movie.
Yeah, it's great.
Flash, 100-yard dash.
I didn't know that. That's funny.
Are you chasing higher frame rates if new cameras come out? You want to see something 4K 240?
Nope. I'm chasing higher dynamic range. I think that's the only thing I really care about. We kind of talked about it, the other day with like resolution, and I could care less really about resolution, even in photos, because there's a certain point where it's like the diminishing returns, especially when it comes to the other side of just storing the photos, because then you're really particular of how many frames you're actually shooting, which kind of loses the whole point of being able to shoot digitally. So there's a certain, I don't know, like a necessity where it's like, do I need to shoot, 50, megapixels plus? Yes or no? Who knows? I don't know. What are you doing?
That is the downside to any kind of high frame rate production. And it's the cost of all these specs, the higher resolutions, the faster frame rates, even for photography. Oh, this has a 30 frame burst, or I don't know, the crazy numbers they're up to now. No blackout, and you can just spray and pray and get every shot you ever imaginable, all the action and all the in between action, so you get the perfect photo. And then you look at how much space it takes up on a hard drive, and you go, did I need to shoot this at 16-bit RAW and have 50 megapixels and have how many frames a second?
Yeah, because
just so I could basically get the same shot that the Sports Illustrated guys were doing 30 years ago with 1 frame a second.
Yeah, there's a lot of excess, which is good because I guess it might inspire you to try something that you wouldn't have tried before. Like if there's a new feature, like I know with the new phase detect on the G9 Mark II, I'm more confident in making more camera moves that I wasn't previously with the GH6, just because I was not confident that I'd be able to pull focus, right? So now I'm way more confident with my camera moves, but guess it depends, but
which is a added benefit for a solo shooter if you're filming by yourself.
Yeah.
In movies, you'd have your focus puller who would just do it for you, but a lot of content creators, videographers are doing it all themselves. They don't have the luxury of someone else there pulling focus just for them. So having your camera do it for you, I think, is great, and it opens up the possibility to do more push, pull,
which
type stuff.
The other downside, because this came up recently, where like some films are shot on a lower resolution than you might expect. Like the Sony Venice, right? Doesn't shoot 4K, but a lot of the footage could be up-res. Like I know a lot of people
The Sony Venice doesn't shoot 4K?
Some people were shooting like 2.5K and then up-resing.
Okay.
Right? So as opposed to like, let's say, I don't know, Sony A7S III or whatever, shoots 4K but doesn't shoot lower resolution. So if you wanted to shoot like at a lower resolution, some cameras won't even allow you to do it.
Interesting. I didn't know that the Venice wasn't 4K.
I'm pretty sure.
I just assumed it was because it's a newer camera and 4K has become the standard. Yeah, you can go ahead and look it up.
It's an older camera, isn't it?
The Venice? I wouldn't. Yeah, but I wouldn't say it's like that old. I mean, there was the big debate back in the day when the Alexa came out, and that was 1080, and Red was pushing 4K around that time, and the argument over resolution versus dynamic range and frame rates, and well, you can only see 1080p anyway.
Sony Cine Alta Venice.
I've never really bought into the idea that 1080 is enough because I can visibly see the difference between 4K and 1080. You know, put a monitor in front of somebody, and that's a regular viewing distance. I understand a lot of people on their television when it's across the room can't see the difference. And even on a smartphone, the screen is so small that arguably you can't see a difference. But on a computer monitor, you certainly can because you're sitting in sometimes inches away from the screen. And I appreciate having 4K in those moments and having the ability to reframe, size things up as needed.
Yeah, I guess it depends on like the version, because the person I know who has one has like an older version, and it's like even this one is like a 1080p.
Okay. And is there a Venice
Still
2? Is that so? There's a Venice 1 and a Venice 2, or is that? I don't know enough about the high-end Sony stuff, just because it's there is a place for it in the market. I know these cameras are popular, but they're also really expensive for features that you could get around, and I think creative individuals can get around them. However...
You mean by doing what?
Like all the professional input-output type stuff, having extra buttons, having interfaces on the other side of the camera. I don't know if the Venice is specifically like that, but there's a lot of the added layers. Like, do you remember, and I mean still to this day, but cinema lenses... are not necessarily sharper or better. They just do certain things a little bit easier in some cases. Having the gear ring built in is a nice feature if you have a focus puller. So yeah, get cinema glass instead of a photography lens. Maybe focus breathing is minimized, but if you're not racking focus, it doesn't really matter. When people think of expensive, they often think of better. But in a lot of cases, the professional premium products that are more expensive are just for a different type of user. Yeah. And I feel like that's lost on people when they think, oh, I need to get the most expensive because it's the best. And you go, well, actually, you could get something like an FX3 and have arguably just as good if you know how to use it. Yeah. And you don't need all those bells and whistles.
Now just doing some more research on the Venice. There's a 8K version, but also interchangeable sensors. So this one has like up to 16 stops of dynamic range, which is amazing. Okay. But sounds more modular. So like a Red camera, I guess, where you can actually swap out sensors.
Configure it to your needs.
Yeah, which is pretty great, I guess, if you do like, let's say, the form factor and you do want all those, you know, plugins and everything. So all you want to upgrade is the sensor.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Good for visual effects. Certainly if you're making some kind of high-end TV show or Hollywood production, you're going to have your visual effects artist work on it. The more resolution, the better. If you're an independent filmmaker and you're just filming talking heads, we talked about that with Oppenheimer and how the big deal with Oppenheimer, oh, it's IMAX, you know, see it like it was meant to be experienced. And the majority of Oppenheimer is two people in a room talking.
Yes. Dialogue heavy.
And you're wondering, what? Why? Why? Why is that the selling point? You're right, just because they can. Yeah. And I know that's Nolan's preferred, you know, format and everything. But if you're an independent filmmaker, you don't need to film dialogue to talking head scenes with anything beyond, certainly nothing beyond 4K probably.
Well, it would also help if you weren't shooting IMAX because of how loud an IMAX camera is.
Oh, true.
So... I don't know. I guess it depends on your workflow. If you want to do everything ADR, you could totally shoot 100%.
Well, now you could just run it through AI and just filter it all out and make it sound perfect. Probably. You can do a lot of cool stuff. That it's the Adobe speech enhancer is pretty powerful.
That's true.
It's not perfect, but it gets a lot done that before would have been I don't want to say impossible, but would have definitely taken a very skilled hand. And a lot of people don't have that level of expertise in audio engineering, but their audio sounds bad. And I am all for better sounding audio.
Well, even we've had issues with like even the like microphones, like the shielding on microphones can have a significant impact. So it really doesn't necessarily matter on like the transmitter, receiver, or recorder. It could have a lot to do with like the actual microphone you're using.
Yeah, the lowest common denominator in any chain in any workflow. That actually happened earlier today. I'm not trying to, this is not me trying to throw you under the bus. Because you were saying that the audio in the G9 Mark II sounded bad earlier.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I said it sounded different.
Yeah, you said it sounded different on playback, and then we looked at it. And that's one of those things that I feel like people could easily miss, is just there's so many places to set your volume, because there's the receiver that you can turn up and down the gain. You have the camera gain, and in some cases, you might even have gain on the microphone itself, the capsule. And so just tracking all that down is kind of a pain, I feel like.
Yeah, because
look, once you get it set and it's good, you just don't touch it and don't mess with it. But there's plenty of times where someone would adjust one thing to fight another.
Yeah, because the way I had it set up, it was the DJI mics, but I was running like some negative gain on the receiver itself and on the camera, but I didn't look at the like the input gain on the camera itself, which is set to standard, but then you can also switch it down to low. So then you don't necessarily have to dial down the receiver, but you suggested turning up the receiver.
Yes.
But then down on the camera.
Yes.
But in my mind, I was like, that doesn't sound like it would sound better. But it did, because it was turning down like the gain in the camera itself.
I don't know the right way, what is best, but what seems to make sense from my mind, and I apply the same theory to color, because a lot of times back in the day, remember I tell people about color grading, and they'd be tweaking their highlights over here, but then they're fighting with their curves over here, and it's a lot of redundant work that's almost competing with itself. And when I think of flows, I think, okay, the microphone is what's capturing the audio that goes to a device. I want that device to be optimized first, because it's the first part of the chain, and then down the line it goes. And typically on those cameras, I feel like, maybe not all the time, but I feel like, people always talk about the preamps and the sound quality and all this and that. So I say, okay, I want my camera low volume, but I'll feed it higher volume. And that's sort of how this setup, even in this room, is configured, where we're kind of controlling the initial microphone volume and then feeding that to a camera, which has another set of audio controls. And it's very tedious to track down problems. And there's a buzz, or there's this, or, oh, it's peaking, is it loud enough? It's... Because you don't even know until it's done. Because then you got to go listen to it later on your iPhone and go, is this too loud? Is it too quiet?
Yeah, which is what I was saying, because when I was monitoring live, it sounded worse than when I just played it back. And I was like, okay, it sounds good, but not when I was listening, like I said, live. But then you made your suggestions, and I was like, all right, I'll try it. And it did sound a lot better, which was good. But it was just interesting because it was flipped on how I had it, just because I didn't look at the input volume on the camera itself.
Which is different, because you're coming from, in this case, you were using the GH5 before, which doesn't have the standard and low gain. No. That's a newer feature I think they introduced on the GH6, and then the G9 Mark II has it as well. So even that, I don't even know, how would you know which one to pick other than just running through various experiments?
The GH5, I mean, we would always like run it down in camera anyway, like negative 12 dB. And
even that might be too loud, because I believe the gain on the GH5 is standard, and then they added the low feature to take it even lower.
Yeah, it's kind of like dialing in your your contrast, which is essentially just like an S curve in the camera. So it's like you can do it, but it's also just applying a curve in camera. So it's like, well, you can do it in post if you really wanted to, but it'll just look better.
There's so many times that changing one component isn't just changing one thing. It ends up changing 5 things or 10 things because of one small adjustment. Oh, I'm going to use a different camera. Well, now all my receiver settings need to be different. Now my camera settings need to be different. And you go, oh, all right, well, adapt to the new thing.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I don't like about working in multiple camera systems, because even like an XLR adapter for, like, let's say the Lumix bodies, It has a very specific hot shoe mount that only works with, Panasonic cameras. And I'm like, all right, sweet. So this $400 item won't work with any other camera. There are like a Tascam. There are other, uh, adapters you can purchase, and a lot of them are like battery powered, which I wouldn't necessarily trust. I'd rather it just run off the constant power that I have running to the camera. That way there's less to deal with, less batteries you have to carry on you and everything. Less worry necessarily that it's just gonna power off randomly in the middle of your shoot.
Oh gosh, that was the worst back in the day, running those like the Tascam DR100 or the Zoom H4n, and just hoping that those batteries, those double A's.
Last, Otherwise, you just have a whole bunch of batteries in your bag, and then you have to either have them charged if they're rechargeable, or just have fresh ones always, basically.
Trying to find power to plug in your audio recorder.
Yeah.
That's what someone was commenting on, because I did a video on that Comica, the Vimo Q. It's the 4 microphone, 1 receiver. And someone was saying, well, it's not a problem if you have some kind of external audio recorder, and syncing really isn't hard these days. And yeah, that's all true. But I think there's a lot of benefits just to running your audio to the... syncing is not hard, but it's tedious and time consuming, even if you're running pluralize. Sometimes it gets it right, sometimes it gets it wrong. You have to wait for it to finish the job.
What is unfortunate is when, like, let's say you do have another shooter and it's like a false take. And then all of a sudden you're all out of order without having another camera also do a false take. And also, if you're running your audio separately, you also want to run a false take on that just so all the numbers align. Because eventually, you're going to get to a point where it's like, okay, I'm going to line everything up, sync everything, and then you have these random clips that throws everything off. So it is nice when it can be run directly to camera.
The best way to do it is those tentacle sync devices. Those work great, but it's that layer of, if it's perfect, it's perfect. However, if one of them gets out of sync, if one camera gets messed up,
it ruins everything.
Now you're fighting with it, because you'll go sync the project and everything will look synced, but it's not actually. And you might find out halfway through if you're not checking everything out. So it's these layers that we introduce of, oh, this is perfect, this is the best way to do it. And 9 times out of 10 it works. And then that 1 time out of 10, you're pulling your hair out fighting with it, going, oh man, I wish I just had made this a little simpler.
Yeah.
Because it's a nightmare. It can be.
I'm looking forward to all this new footage I've been shooting with the G9 Mark II. Hopefully it's not going to surprise me in a bad way. It's like, oh man, I relied too heavily on this autofocus, and then it, comes back to bite me somehow.
Yeah, that's the lessons to be learned, because you can actually dial in those autofocus settings to be more responsive, to be faster.
And then setting zones, like in limiters, like that was pretty cool, I thought. I was like, oh yeah, like why not? Because it used to be on the lens itself, where the lens would give you a parameter where it was like only focus on things like close to me versus further away, or the whole distance of the lens. So that used to be like a very manual way to do that, but now you can actually program it within the camera. So it's even more convenient, because maybe your lens doesn't have that feature, but now all of your lenses potentially could. Which
is a nice hack. For the amount we talk about Lumix cameras, because we use them most probably, that focus setting limiting is great on things like the GH6 or even the GH5, because I think it's on the GH5, but it's definitely on the GH6, where you can tell it, okay, yeah, I understand the autofocus is not great on this, but definitely don't focus to infinity,
right,
and definitely don't focus to macro. And then, the autofocus is still going to be poor, but at least it's poor within the range that you're expecting, versus, because there's plenty of times the GH6, it'll just throw completely out of focus, and you go, and what are you doing?
You were saying that you didn't like when somebody's like, when they leave frame and then it just goes directly to the back.
Straight to the background.
Theoretically, you could like put a limiter and be like, okay, don't go all the way to the back of the room. Just kind of stay right there.
Yeah, because I don't know when I'd be using autofocus for infinity focus. That seems unnecessary.
No. Well,
human distances, I don't know. A lot, depending on the lens you're using, 5-10 feet.
Perfect. I will say that. Like you can put it to infinity.
Oh,
and it's not.
No, it's not infinity.
So,
no, it's always past.
So there is that.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of annoying.
But still, it's not a use case for autofocus. It's a use case for manual focus to infinity.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice just to set it to infinity and have everything in focus or whatever, but it's not the case. It never is.
Yeah.
What is that called? There is a word for that. Like the most focus for your lens. Like there is like a magical setting.
Gosh, what's the term for it? Because it used to be built into those old vintage lenses. They'd have the little chart on there.
Just like be in this range.
So if you were
solid.
at f8, you could focus to like 3 feet, and that would have from 3 feet to infinity.
Yep.
And I forget, it's not parfocal,
No.
because that's when you're zooming and it's maintaining focus. It's like that though.
There's a word for it.
And
Comment
someone's
down
going to
below.
comment and say, "You idiots!"
Also comment the actual resolution for the Sony Venice.
Oh, I hear your phone. I
that
hear
it?
it. It goes. Zzz.
Yeah, I don't know where I heard it. I heard it a long time ago that somebody was maybe it has the option to shoot lower resolutions, which would be nice. But who knows?
I don't know.
This
I don't
one's
know
up
enough
to
about the Sonys.
8.6K.
But what I do know about the
Holy
Sonys that surprised me was that FX6 shoots MXF, and that was a little bit shocking. I hate MXF files. I don't know why. I'm just opposed to them from back in the day with all the Canon
Yeah.
C500, C300 days. These MXF files were just a nightmare to work with. And then I see an MXF file coming off the Sony FX6 and I go, ew, delete. Well, don't delete it. And then we looked and I thought, well, surely there's a way. You can. It's a professional camera. You should be able to change to not MP4, MOV maybe. Nope, not an option.
If you're gonna
It's
choose
actually
to
pretty
play with
limiting.
those cameras, you're gonna be forced into their ecosystem, I guess.
I wonder why MXF is so preferred.
Maybe it's more robust file type.
I just imagine though there must be some licensing thing. Maybe it's cheaper to license MXF or it's open source or something. I don't know why these camera companies
doesn't
keep going with
explain their
MXF.
folder
I'd revolt in disgust. And there's probably nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly playable. It's fine.
Yeah.
But if I can't preview it in Finder, no thanks.
Yeah,
I don't want that.
Well, you were discussing just the folder structure of Sony, and I thought that was hilarious because I never
Biggest
really
pet
put
peeve.
too much thought into it because it kind of is what it is. But I guess if everyone felt that way, they wouldn't know to change it, you know?
I think that's what happens. People don't realize what they're suffering with.
It's like this could be simpler for sure.
Because if you copy a Sony card, I believe the first folder is called private.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, don't look in here.
Don't
It's
look in the
mine.
folder.
These are mine.
Where's my footage? Is it in this folder called private? Is it okay? It must be private. You go in there, and then I think it's
classified.
is it M4 root, general,
Yeah.
XML? I think
Clip.
Clip is under M4 root. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, you can finally find Clip, which is where your clips are. But then there's also like 5 other folders for thumbnails and proxies, and then general. And I'm pretty sure there's just random garbage files, XML files, and bin files. And it's so disgusting to look at whenever I copy footage from a Sony camera.
Yeah,
Because
the
the
only-
first time you wonder, do I need all this? Do I need all these folders?
You find out if you need it, if your clip ever gets corrupted. That's when you find out you need all those other files, which we've found out a handful of times, at least twice.
And that's super annoying because when you go to
2
import
times.
that into Premiere, if I go file import and I just pick my base raw folder, now it's going to start importing all this junk
Yeah.
that I don't want. I don't know why it can't be clean. The Lumix cameras do. Oh, the other thing about Sony, super minor gripe. The card itself is named Untitled.
Yes.
So you plug a card in, it comes in untitled. It would make sense if it was called Sony, but no, it's untitled, and then it's a folder private, and then it's all the other folders. You know what happens when you plug in a Lumix card? It says Lumix
Maybe you have to name that
card.
and then once it's named, then you should be good to go from there.
Maybe that was the other strange thing about the Sony, that the clip names were stored on the memory card.
Oh yeah, yeah.
'Cause
You were
I-
telling me that.
I
I
used-
didn't believe you until you showed it to me. Though
Yeah.
I was like, "There's no way." I guess there is.
So I'm so used to the Lumix cameras having, and there's probably a way to do this on the Sony cameras too, but by default, they don't work this way, at least from what I could tell. On the Lumix cameras, if you shoot on camera A, those files will be named something. And if you shoot on camera B, those files will be named something different on a different memory card. And it doesn't matter which memory cards you use. Camera A is named like camera A and camera B is named like camera B. On the Sony cameras, I used the same memory card between 2 different cameras. And it just kept running the same file name as if
Right.
the memory card knew the name, but it was 2 completely different cameras. I'm like, why are my file names the exact same as they've been, as if it was one camera?
Yeah. I wonder if it's a setting in the camera too.
It probably
because I would assume like there are certain scenarios where that would be beneficial because you're like, yeah, I want to keep this cadence going, continue on.
Regardless of what I'm filming on?
Who knows? They're like, I just need more memory. Somebody, I got an SD card in my pocket. Okay.
I'm just trying to think if I've ever filmed on, because on the Ursas, they're camera specific. So you can clearly see, oh, these clips were filmed with a different camera because the file name is different.
Yeah.
But the Sony's was just like, yeah, this memory card, doesn't matter what camera. This memory card is the Bible.
Yeah, this. Who knows? I don't know.
I'm
Maybe
sure there's a way
maybe
to
it's
change
to
it.
do as little damage as possible. It wants to do its own thing.
It's strange, a little bewildering for a default setting to just work that way. But people just get used to it and they think, yeah, that's what it is. Of course I need untitled cards with private folders and M4 root. How are you supposed to know if you don't know anything about photography, about video, you don't know anything, you buy a Sony because people say they're the best autofocus, all the best colors, they're so good. And then you copy your card and you go, where's my footage? Oh yeah, it's in that M4 root folder. Huh? M4 root? What does that mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, but now it's just
in there. Believe me.
clips and bins. Where's it at? It's under clip. Okay, but do I need the rest of this? Oh, maybe. Mm-hmm. If it gets corrupted. Well, how do I know if it's corrupted?
You'll find out. Find out if it doesn't play.
It's really goofy to me, and it's been that way forever.
Yeah. Maybe that's why they don't change it. It's a legacy now. They're like, all right, this is what we're known
That's
for.
our style.
We're gonna keep it going until somebody buys them out, I guess.
I think it's an oversight. I feel it's like something that was designed by engineers, and they didn't realize it didn't make any sense because it made sense to them for whatever reason, and they just said, "Oh, well, it is what it is."
That's what blows me away. It's like, yeah, it's just been that way. That's just how it is.
No.
Like I have never really put too much thought into it because I'm like, yeah, that's how it is.
I think it's the DJI. I think the Pocket 3, the Osmo Pocket 3, the SD card is called SD card. I think that's how that one comes
Nice.
in. They all are so...
Well, Lumix, it comes in.
It comes in
with
as
its
Lumix.
name, yeah.
This makes sense.
The Tascams would come in.
Tascam.
Yeah, like DR40.
Yeah.
Like, all right.
I know
Here we
one.
go. That's exactly what that is. Thank you.
And then you go to the files, and if it did the Sony method, it wouldn't have been the DR40. It would have been like the DR100. And it'd be like, wait, how do I know what I recorded this on?
Who knows?
No way to know. No way to know. All right, we'll wrap it up there. That's enough rambling, schmambling about stuff that no one cares about, but I find very irritating.
I think the only other frustrating thing was maybe GoPro. There was a period of time where like GoPros would film all out of whack, and you wouldn't know necessarily how it was going to be ordered in your memory card, which is kind of weird. But that was a while ago. That doesn't happen anymore.
The goofiest thing was, well, not the goofiest, but one goofy thing from the past was when the GH4 was still on FAT32 architecture. And so the clips could only be 4 gigs, which was roughly 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So your take, it could record unlimited, no overheating, no clip limit. You could record for 2 hours
But they would all
in
be
4
clipped.
4 minute increments,
Yeah, it
4
would all just
gigabyte
have-
increments. All chopped up, and you go, oh. And thankfully they fixed that for the GH5. But the GH4 was not that long ago, and it's amazing how much we suffered through for so
It
long.
was an easy fix, though. We just made a nest.
It was
And
an
that was
easy fix,
The one take.
but also a really silly problem to have in the first place.
yeah.
You want clips bigger than 4 gigs?
I
Why?
think, doesn't that have to do something with like importing the cameras? Like I remember that had like record limit had a lot to do with the fact that they didn't want like photography cameras to be charged the same as
Yeah,
like
the
video
e-text thing.
cameras or something
But I don't
like
know, that might have just been a myth. That's definitely what people said. It had to have the 30-minute limit, but it didn't seem to be an issue for some
Yeah.
cameras. I don't know. Lots of goofy stuff we worked through, and we're still dealing with to this day with Sony and whatnot. It's so frustrating. One day we'll reach the promised land of just perfection. You import the card, and there's your video files.
It's
and
gonna
there's
make
your
the
raw
it's gonna give
images
you
and your JPEGs.
the whole edit upon
Ooh.
export,
Yep.
which much like this podcast, right? When we stop, it's a full finished podcast.